Welcome to the Newsmakers Podcast. I'm Billy Hollowell, and this is a show where we go behind the headlines every day to bring you an interview with a pastor, entertainer, politician, or other notable news figure. And this is a show, again, it's daily, but it's based on our weekly TV show, which is also called Newsmakers. You can watch it on the CBN News channel and also on our YouTube page. And on this show, every day, we dive deep. It's a little more longer form with one of the people who you will often see on our Newsmakers show or across the CBN News platforms. On today's Newsmakers, we are talking all about that now infamous presidential debate between former President Donald Trump and Vice President Kamala Harris. We're welcoming Kelsey Pritchard, State Director of Susan B. Anthony Pro-Life America. She joins us to explain why she believes Harris distorted and misled on the issue of abortion and why her organization sent a letter to ABC News with some very specific demands. We're going to get into that and much more on today's Newsmakers. With no further ado, here is Kelsey Pritchard. Well, I want to welcome you to CBN News. We have a lot to talk about today. Your organization, Susan B. Anthony Pro-Life America, sent a letter off to the president of ABC News pushing for a correction as well as a meeting with abortion survivors after debate moderator Linsey Davis during the presidential debate this week fact-checked former President Trump. Take us through a little bit of what is in this letter and why you sent it off to ABC.
Yeah, during the debate, as you said, one of the moderators attempted to fact check and got it completely wrong or was misleading the public. I'm not sure if it was intentional or not, but they gave the impression that no state allows infanticide, that no state would allow for the harm of abortion survivors. And that is completely incorrect. There's actually 15 states that don't have moral life protections on the books, including Tim Walz's state of Minnesota. And the reason they don't have the protection is because of him, because of a law he signed getting rid of it. And since he's been governor, 8 babies have survived abortions there and died. And so we sent that letter to set the record straight, to ask them for a correction, and to ask them to meet with us and abortion survivors, because what they're essentially doing is erasing a whole group of people in this country. And this is a group of people who have already lived through the unthinkable. They survived abortion. Some of them have disabilities because of that. A lot of them have a lot of mental weight and mental things that they struggle with having survived an abortion. And so to erase that population, to pretend like they don't exist, it's completely wrong. And we hope ABC will take us up on their offer.
You know, when you look at what Linsey Davis, the moderator, said, she said there's no state in this country where it is legal to kill a baby after it's born. And it's interesting because the way things are worded sometimes, right, it will often have a meaning. And I think in people's minds when they hear that, they think, well, yes, of course, there's no law where you could go out and abort a baby after it's born, right? And that's the line a lot of people are going with. Well, you can't have an abortion after birth. But to your point, there are people, and this is actually a foreign concept, maybe outside of the pro-life world or even within it, for those who don't know, who do survive abortions, as you have stated. And the point here that was being made is that those children, if there's no protection, they would be left to essentially die after they're accidentally born alive. Can you talk a little bit about that dynamic of surviving an abortion? Because again, I think people will think, well, how is that even possible? How could a baby survive an abortion? Can you explain that?
Yeah, so there was a group called the Abortion Survivors Network. It was founded by Melissa Oden. She is an abortion survivor. There are 700 people across this country who are part of that network. And so that's just those people who are a part of that organization specifically. So there are many, many more abortion survivors across this country. And yeah, it can happen because, you know, another lie that they told in the debate is that late-term abortions don't happen. Donald Trump really tried to push back on this and talking about how Kamala doesn't have a limit and she's okay with 7th, 8th, 9th trimester or 9th month abortions, late trimester abortions. And the moderators, again, you know, kind of running cover on that point. But the truth is that late abortions do happen. We have 55,000 abortions in this country that happen after 15 weeks. That's the point a baby can feel pain. And we have 10,000 abortions that happen after 21 weeks. And the shocking and awful thing about that is that those abortions are done on healthy mothers. and that many of those abortions are done actually for the same reasons that early abortions are done, for elective reasons. There was an Atlantic article of this this abortionist in Colorado who does late-term abortions, and he talked about how he does these abortions for sex selection reasons. So, the mom is having a girl perhaps and wants a boy, and that's why he commits those late-term abortions. So that's essentially how babies can survive abortion, is because they're actually being done so late in the term and late in pregnancy. And it happens sometimes that babies do survive.
Let's dig into some of those numbers, right? Because if you go, let's say we go with the most conservative numbers, the CDC, they'll say, okay, there's over 600,000 abortions, right? Which is a lower number that we'll see in others, but that's their stat. And if you say 1%, and you'll often notice that those on the pro-choice side will use this 1%. They'll say, well, only 1% of abortions are done after 21 weeks. Even if that is the case, 1% of abortions, even if that number is lower, and you mentioned 10,000, the lowest you can get that number is 6,200, right? In 2021, that's a lot of babies still. And so this question of, are these babies only being put to death or being aborted because there's some extenuating health circumstance, right? This is what the vice president said during the debate. Essentially, these are horrific situations. The baby won't survive. The mother has a health problem. So they do these things. Now, you were just stating, though, that we don't really have any data proving that that's true. In fact, from what you were saying, some of these mothers, many of them maybe even, are making the same decision, just saying, I'm not ready to be a mother. Why do you think people would wait? Because this is the question that people have, so long into a pregnancy to make that choice.
Yeah, I mean, if you read that article by The Atlantic, and that late-term abortion is saying it's basically for the same reason. I think, unfortunately, a lot of those cases have to do with pressure, have to do with coercion, have to do with, the father is now out of the picture, and things are not going as planned, and things are getting scary for that woman. And so I don't know that we have a great picture exactly why those happen, but we do have stories of coercion late in pregnancy, and that can be a leading factor in why someone would all of a sudden decide, okay, I'm going to have an abortion now. And so, regardless, that, like you said, if it's 10,000 babies or 6,000, these are babies. These are people. These are people whose lives are ending at the point they can feel pain, when they can smile, suck their thumbs. We know if they're a boy or a girl, they can survive outside of the womb. And so I think it's just ridiculous how the abortion industry tries to write this number off and just say, oh, it's 1%. Well, these are living human beings, and this is how we all start off. We all start off in the womb, and we all deserve the right to life.
Even if people want, and of course there's massive debate about this, even in the pro-life movement, right? But if they want to have an argument that, okay, well, if a baby has a low chance of survival, and I think the argument that a mother's health at 7-8 months gestation is a reason to have an abortion is a faulty argument. But let's say we go with the baby itself. The baby has these health issues and is not going to survive after birth, so we should allow abortion. None of these places that you mentioned, and we'll get into some of the specific states perhaps in a minute here, where there are no limits on abortion. There are places in this country where there are absolutely no limits on abortion. Nobody has proposed, none of these people, Harris, none of them, to say, okay, well, we're going to ban it after 6 months unless there's an extenuating circumstance. They have no interest in enacting those laws to offer any protections. In fact, during the debate, when she was asked the question of, do you favor any protections, she didn't respond with anything other than, I want to go back to Roe, essentially. Why do you think these individuals, people like Harris, have declined to put any restriction whatsoever, even with those exemptions?
I think it has something to do with a lot of where their money comes from. I mean, they've slowly gotten to this point. The Democrats used to be the party of safe, legal, and rare. Now they're the party of abortion done by anyone, anytime, anywhere. And they can't draw the line. They don't name a limit. They will say Roe, but what exactly does Roe mean? Because under Roe, there were some states, like there are today, that allow late-term abortion, all trimester abortion. So she's really trying to, appear moderate, at the same time to please those people in the abortion industry who give her, millions of dollars and have given her tons of money throughout her political career. And so there's this disturbing tie between abortion businesses and the Democrats. And it really shows us how far they've come from that point in the 90s when they thought abortion was a tragedy as well, but a necessary thing for some women to have the option of. And now they're the pro-abortion party and they count their success as more abortions. It's very disturbing. I do want to mention go back to your comment on babies with diagnoses, though. I think there are some people that get a little, even pro-life people wonder, okay, should we allow abortion in those instances? And really what we're talking about here, though, is babies with disabilities. We're talking about babies with Down syndrome. We're talking with babies with a trisomy condition. And a lot of times, if those babies get the right medical care they need, the mom gets to take them home from the hospital. In Japan, babies with a trisomy condition, 80% of them are discharged from the hospital. Why is that so different from what we see in America? Well, it's because they give them the treatment that they need when they need it. Versus in America, our solution is abortion all the time. And even in our medical community, our doctors have really been pushed to bring that to women and to push them to abort. So, we really are trying to push back on that and bring light to, we can't attack these babies with disabilities. They're as human as we are. And a lot of those times, those diagnoses are wrong and women have aborted when there was no health condition at all.
Yeah, you hear those stories quite often. It's so interesting to me that people who, let's say they find out, okay, at 32 weeks that the brain didn't develop, right? Or you can have all these arguments. My point isn't so much those arguments. It is that you could easily, as a pro-choice politician, say, you know what, I still want those exemptions. And of course, many pro-lifers will still disagree with that. I want those exemptions, but I also want to say that we're not going to allow a woman to walk in at 7 or 8 months pregnant and have an abortion if she's perfectly healthy. We're going to put a cap on that. The fact that there are no caps on that in some of these places is remarkable. And that when she was asked that question, and this is not a partisan statement, I would say this regardless of who's answering the question, Roe was about, and correct me if I'm wrong, Roe was about providing access to abortion, demanding that states essentially allow it through viability. It was not about protecting babies at all. So to respond to a question of, do you support any protections with, I want Roe back, doesn't answer the question at all, correct?
Yeah, that's really a non-answer. She's trying to appear moderate. She is not moderate at all on this issue.
So you spoke about this a little bit before, but as we round out to a close here, how many places are there? Because she said, as you stated, abortions don't happen in the 9th month of pregnancy. She very forcefully said this is offensive to women to suggest that they are happening in the 9th month of pregnancy. Do they happen in the 9th month of pregnancy, A, which I think we've established, but I'm going to let you answer it again. And how many places in America can you go and seek an abortion if you wish at 9 months in pregnancy?
There are 10 states in our country and in the city of Washington, D.C., where you can have an abortion at any point. There is no limit. That includes Minnesota, which again is Tim Walz's home state. And they have no limit in Minnesota because of a law that Governor Walz signed recently, since after the Dobbs decision. And so, do these abortions happen in the 9th month? I don't know if your viewers or your listeners are familiar with the DC-5, but we have a very clear case there, pictures of the babies' bodies that were found in our clinic in DC, and they're fully formed. They look to be around, a couple of them 37 weeks or further. And so, it's disturbing, and I would hope that there aren't hardly any 9th month abortions that happen, but we have an instance there where it seems like they were happening, and they did happen in Washington, D.C. And the media's ability to just ignore that story completely and to try to paint the person who found the bodies as a radical, crazy, militant pro-lifer is just ridiculous. Like, they have completely, it's really egregious the way that they have turned a blind eye to late-term abortion victims and survivors in this country.
Final question, going back to the letter to ABC News, watching the fact check there obviously shocked a lot of people. Why do you think they didn't fact check some of the things we're talking about here? I mean, you pointed out things you believe are lies that were told on the other side. Why wasn't there a moment in your view where Linsey Davis or David Muir said, hey, this isn't true, Vice President Harris? Why do you think they didn't do that?
Yeah, I think the leadership at ABC and a lot of, the majority of the journalists there, they have a very clear slant. And the media bias that we're seeing is just unbelievable. And, I would say particularly it's bad on the issue of abortion, but we know how hostile they've always been to Donald Trump. And going into that debate, I think they knew what they were doing. This was intentional. And they were trying to give their leadership, their execs, what they wanted, and serving this far left agenda and trying to sway the voters on the election as well. They're really the ones who are interfering with this election.
Well, I appreciate you taking the time coming on and breaking this all down with us. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you. God bless, Billy.
That's all for today's Newsmakers podcast. Be sure to tune in for the next episode of the show, and also head over to the CBN News YouTube channel and the CBN News channel to watch Newsmakers every week. We'll see you soon.